There's a specific kind of exhaustion. It's not the tired you get from working hard. It's the tired you get from constantly comparing, from scrolling through other people's lives and feeling like you're running a race you're already losing. Everyone around you seems to be ahead. They've got their careers figured out. They've got relationships that work. They've got stability. They've got direction. And you're still here, still figuring it out, still behind. The thing about this feeling is that it's not really about facts. It doesn't matter if you're actually behind or not. What matters is that you feel behind. And that feeling is real. It's affecting your decisions. It's affecting your mood. It's affecting how you see yourself and your future. You're making moves not because they align with what you want, but because you're trying to catch up. You're in a constant state of panic. Like everyone else got the memo about how to live and you're still waiting for yours. And here's what's really interesting about this. The people who feel most behind are often the ones who are actually doing pretty well. They have jobs, they have accomplishments, they have things they've built, but none of it feels like enough. Because somewhere inside you've internalized the message that you should be further along, that you should have more figured out by now, that there's a timeline you're supposed to be following and you're behind on it. This is where the psychology gets complex, because feeling behind isn't actually about your circumstances. It's about your internal narrative. It's about the story you've been telling yourself about what you should be, what you should have accomplished by this point in your life, how you should look, how successful you should be. And somewhere along the way, you started believing that story. You started believing that if you haven't hit certain markers by certain ages, you failed. You're behind. You're not going to make it. The comparison is relentless. You see someone your age getting promoted. You feel behind. You see someone getting married. You feel behind. You see someone buying a house. You feel behind. You see someone traveling. You feel behind. And the goalpost keeps moving. Even if you accomplish something, even if you hit a milestone, there's always someone further ahead. There's always something else you should have done by now. It's an impossible standard that shifts the moment you get close to it. What's devastating about this pattern is how it affects your present moment. You're not actually living your life. You're running towards someone else's timeline. You're making decisions based on fear. You're saying yes to things you don't want. You're pushing yourself toward goals you don't actually care about. You're performing a version of success that looks good on paper but feels hollow inside. And the whole time, you're waiting to feel satisfied. You're waiting to finally feel like you've caught up. But you never do. Because even when you accomplish something big, even when you hit a goal you've been working toward, there's no celebration, there's no relief. There's just a moment of checking the box before your brain moves to the next thing you should be doing, the next way you're behind, the next person who's ahead of you. It becomes this exhausting hamster wheel where accomplishment never actually feels like accomplishment. And here's what makes this even more painful. This feeling often comes with a deep shame. You feel ashamed that you're not further along. You feel ashamed that you're not where you should be. You feel ashamed that other people seem to have it figured out and you don't. So you hide it. You don't talk about your struggles. You present a version of yourself that looks like you have it more together than you do. You act like things are fine. Things are on track. Everything's fine. While internally you're spiraling. You're panicking. You're convinced that everyone's going to figure out that you don't deserve what you have, that you're a fraud, that you're behind. This shame creates isolation because you're the only one who knows how much you're struggling. Everyone else looks like they're doing great, so you assume that you're the only one who's behind. You're the only one who's struggling. You're the only one who's scared. And that isolation makes the feeling stronger. It makes the panic worse. It makes you feel even more fundamentally broken than everyone else. What's really important to understand here is that this feeling of being behind is actually a symptom. It's your nervous system telling you something. It's not just about being behind in life. It's about feeling fundamentally unsafe. It's about not trusting that things are going to work out. It's about a deep belief that you need to be ahead of the curve in order to survive. That if you're not constantly achieving, constantly moving forward, constantly trying to catch up, something bad is going to happen. This manifests as perfectionism, as overworking, as this constant state of low-level anxiety that you've learned to live with so well that you don't even notice it anymore. It's your baseline. You wake up and there's this underlying sense of urgency, this sense that you're running out of time, that you need to do more, that you need to be more, that you need to figure it out faster. And you don't really question where that comes from. You just accept it as truth. But here's what's interesting. This feeling often starts much earlier than you think. It's not something that just showed up when you turned 30 or 40 or whenever you started noticing it. It's been there, building, getting stronger. The seeds of it were planted a long time ago, in environments where love was conditional, where approval had to be earned, where you had to be good enough, smart enough, successful enough to matter, where your value was tied to your performance. Some people grew up in competitive families, where everything was compared, where your sibling was smarter, or prettier, or more talented, and you were always measuring yourself against them, always coming up short, always working harder to try to close the gap. That comparison became your baseline. That sense of being behind became normal. Others grew up with parents who had high expectations, parents who pushed, who demanded excellence, who made it clear that good wasn't good enough. You had to be great, you had to exceed, you had to prove your worth through accomplishment, and you learned that your value was directly tied to how much you achieved, how successful you were, how far ahead you were. Some grew up in environments of scarcity, where there wasn't enough, not enough money, not enough attention, not enough resources, and you learned that you had to compete for crumbs. You had to hustle, you had to be better than everyone else just to survive, and that survival mode became hardwired. Even when you got to abundance, even when there's plenty now, that sense of scarcity still runs the show. You still act like you need to be ahead, like you need to be first, like you need to accumulate everything possible before it runs out. The culture doesn't help. Social media shows you curated versions of everyone's lives. Everyone seems to be ahead. Everyone seems to have it figured out. Everyone seems to be living their best life while you're struggling. Of course you feel behind. You're comparing your internal experience to everyone else's external highlight reel. You're competing against an illusion, and the messaging around aging doesn't help either. There are supposed milestones. You should have a degree by this age. You should have a good job by this age. You should be married by this age. You should own a house by this age. You should have kids by this age. And if you haven't hit those markers, there's something wrong. You're late. You're behind. You're failing. The timeline is rigid and there's no room for deviation. But here's what nobody tells you. Those timelines are arbitrary. Those markers don't actually matter. And the people who seem to be ahead, a lot of them are just as terrified as you are. They're just dealing with it differently. They're just hiding it better. They're just performing confidence while internally spiraling about what comes next. The real issue is that you've accepted someone else's definition of success, someone else's timeline, someone else's markers, and you spent your energy trying to match them instead of figuring out what actually matters to you, what you actually want. What would actually make you feel fulfilled and satisfied and like you're living your own life? Because here's the truth. You're not behind. You're not failing. You're not fundamentally broken. You're just living according to a script that was written for someone else. And the moment you realize that, the moment you start questioning whether these markers actually matter to you, the moment you start deciding what success actually means to your life instead of what it's supposed to mean, everything shifts. It starts with getting honest about what you actually want. Not what you should want, not what looks good, not what impresses people, but what actually matters to you, What would actually make you feel satisfied? What would actually feel like success in your life? And that's harder than it sounds because you've probably been ignoring your own desires for so long that you don't even know what they are anymore. It requires getting quiet, stopping the comparison for a minute, putting the phone down, and asking yourself some real questions. What do I actually want my life to look like? What would make me feel good? What do I care about? And listening to the answers, not your parents' answers, not society's answers, not Instagram's answers, your answers. And then it requires doing something radical. It requires making decisions based on what you actually want instead of what you think you should want. It requires saying no to things that don't align with your life. It requires being willing to look different, to move slower than everyone else, to take unconventional paths, to define success on your own terms. This is revolutionary because you'll probably feel behind at first, because you're not following the script anymore, because you're moving at your own pace. And that can feel terrifying, it can feel wrong, it can feel like you're falling behind even more. But what's actually happening is that you're finally moving toward your own life instead of someone else's. If this resonates, if you're seeing yourself in this constant state of panic and comparison and never enoughness, that awareness is the first step, because you can't change what you don't see, and you can't build a life that's actually yours while you're running someone else's race. The feeling of being behind isn't a reflection of reality. It's a reflection of internal beliefs that were planted long ago. Beliefs about your worth. Beliefs about what you need to do to matter. Beliefs about what success looks like. And those beliefs can be examined. They can be questioned. They can be changed. Understanding where this comes from, why you feel it, that's what we're doing here at The Forgotten Self. We're looking at the stories we've internalized, the timelines we're racing against, the definitions of success we never questioned. If this helped you see something about yourself, subscribe. Because we're building a community where you can question the script, where you can define your own success, where being behind is just a story, not your reality. Until next time, check the timeline you're running toward and ask yourself if it's actually yours.